Chapter 1. The King Who Smiled. The capital of the empire was exactly as Duke Alaric Thorne remembered. Grand, suffocating, and far too polished for a man who preferred the raw edges of the world. He had returned only days ago from overseas. For years, Alaric had lived beyond the empire's borders, commanding trade fleets, negotiating with foreign powers, and building a reputation that traveled faster than ships ever could. A man of logic, of control, of distance. Then his father died. And with that single piece of news, everything changed. The title of Duke fell onto his shoulders. The vast northern territory, rich, powerful, and strategically vital, became his responsibility overnight. But inheritance within the empire was never simple. Recognition had to come from the capital, from the king. Which was exactly why Alaric now stood at the towering gates of the royal palace, already regretting every decision that had led him here. The capital and its king. The whispers had started long before he arrived. About the king, a young ruler, a war genius, a monster, an enigma. Alaric hadn't believed it at first. Enigmas were myths, stories whispered to scare arrogant alphas into humility. But then, he stepped into the throne room. And the moment he did, he understood. A predator on the throne. The air changed. No, it pressed. Heavy, dominant, suffocating. Alaric, an S-tier alpha who had made lesser men tremble with a glance, felt something unfamiliar coil in his chest. Instinct. Warning. Submission. His sharp eyes lifted toward the throne and landed on the king, Valerius Volkov. Young, beautiful, terrifying. He sat lazily against the throne, one leg draped over the other, fingers tapping against the armrest as if the entire court bored him. His expression was cold, carved from something inhumanly perfect. His gaze, detached, calculating. A ruler who had conquered wars before most men learned to hold swords. A god among men. And in that moment, Alaric understood something deeply, instinctively horrifying. Enigmas were not myths. Because standing there, beneath that gaze, he, an alpha feared across continents, felt like a house cat. In front of a tiger. The moment everything went wrong. Duke Alaric Thorne of the Northern Territory. The announcement echoed. Alaric stepped forward, posture straight, expression controlled. He bowed, precise, respectful, distant. Just as he had practiced. Just as expected. Just as, lift your head. The voice was calm, low, commanding. Alaric obeyed. And then, it happened. The king smiled. The entire court froze. Because their king. The same king who had sentenced traitors without blinking. The same king who had watched battlefields burn without emotion. Smiled. Not a smirk, not a polite curve, a real smile. Soft, bright, warm. His eyes, previously cold and unreadable, lit up like he had just found something precious. And it was all directed at Alaric. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Then, a noble in the back dropped something. A guard choked. Someone whispered a prayer. Alaric's thoughts. Rapid decline into panic. I see. This is how I die. Not in battle. Not in politics. But in this cursed palace. The king descends. Before anyone could recover, the king stood up, stepped down from the throne, walked directly toward Alaric. No hesitation. No protocol. No distance. Beautiful. The word fell from Valerius's lips so naturally, so casually, as if he had every right to say it, as if it were fact. Alaric blinked once, slowly. Your Majesty? Valerius stopped in front of him. Too close. Far too close. His gaze roamed over Alaric's face with open fascination, like a man admiring something he already owned. You traveled far, the king murmured. You must be tired. Is he concerned? But why is he concerned? And why is he looking at me like that? All these thoughts were running in his head until suddenly he heard. I will arrange accommodations for you in the palace. Alaric opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That won't be necessary. I have already prepared. No. The king smiled again. Softer this time. More dangerous. You will stay here. Ah. It wasn't a suggestion. Court reactions. Absolute chaos, whisper edition. From the sidelines. Did His Majesty just... He called him beautiful. He hasn't smiled in 10 years. 10? I've worked here for 15. I've never seen it. Is this love? At first sight? A court lady fanned herself dramatically. I always knew this day would come. You did not. I did. Alaric versus the situation. Alaric straightened, forcing composure back into his body. I appreciate your Majesty's generosity, but I would not wish to inconvenience the royal household. Inconvenience? Valerius tilted his head slightly. Then he reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair from Alaric's face. The entire court collectively stopped breathing. You could never be an inconvenience. I need to leave. Immediately. Preferably alive, he thought to himself. A silver-haired advisor stepped forward, clearing his throat. Your Majesty, he said carefully, perhaps we should proceed with the formal recognition. Later. But... Later. The advisor paused, looked at Alaric, then back at the king. Then sighed the sigh of a man who had given up on life years ago. As you wish, Your Majesty. Meanwhile, the royal knights stood like statues, except one, who leaned slightly toward another. Should we prepare the guest chambers? No. No? Prepare the royal wing. Oh. Alaric's final realization. By the time the meeting ended, no official matters had been discussed. No documents signed. No formalities completed. Instead, he had been called beautiful, ordered to stay in the palace, personally escorted by the king, and stared at like prey. As he was led through the palace halls, Alaric finally allowed his expression to crack. Just slightly. Just enough for a quiet, exhausted thought to slip through. This king is not normal. Behind him, Valerius watched. Eyes dark. Smile soft. Something deep, ancient, and possessive flickering beneath the surface. And somewhere in the palace, the staff had already begun preparing for a wedding that had not yet been announced. Chapter 2. The Lunatics' Courtship. If the battlefield knew King Valerius Volkov, then the palace knew something else entirely. The king the world feared. Beyond the palace walls, Valerius was a name that silenced entire nations. A war god. A strategist who had expanded the empire with frightening precision. A ruler who never hesitated, never faltered, never smiled. But inside the palace? Inside the palace? He followed Duke Alaric Thorn like a lovesick ghost. Alaric's daily suffering begins. It started subtly. Or at least, that's what Alaric told himself. Day 1. A servant approached him during breakfast. His Majesty instructed us to prepare your favorite meal. Alaric frowned. I never told him my preference. The servant smiled. Yes, he observed it. That's not comforting. Day 2. His cloak was replaced. Softer fabric, warmer lining. Perfect fit. Day 3. His schedule rearranged by the king, without asking. Then it escalated. By the end of the week, Alaric realized something deeply, deeply wrong. Scene 1. The table incident. Lunch was supposed to be peaceful, quiet, civilized. Alaric sat alone at the long dining table, finally enjoying a rare moment of silence. He picked up his fork, took a bite, exhaled. Peace? At last? The craftsmanship is quite impressive. Alaric froze. Slowly, very slowly. He looked down. And there, under the table, was the king, lying on his back, inspecting the underside of the table like it held the secrets of the universe. Your Majesty. Valerius glanced up at him, completely unbothered. Yes? Why are you under the table? I'm inspecting the woodwork. A pause. During my lunch? Yes. Why? Valerius tilted his head. As your host, I must ensure your surroundings are flawless. I'm going to jump out of a window. From the doorway, 2 maids watched with shining eyes. Look at them. He's even inspecting furniture for him. That's love. That is not love. Scene 2. The library disaster. Alaric sought refuge in the royal library. A place of silence, of logic, of sanity. He sat near the window, a book in hand, finally relaxed. The sunlight filtered in softly. The world felt normal. until a faint creak echoed above him. Alaric looked up and nearly dropped his book. Valerius was hanging from the chandelier, upside down. Your Majesty. Yes? Why are you hanging from the ceiling? Better lighting. For what? For your face? I have no words. A librarian in the corner clasped her hands dramatically. He's adjusting lighting for him. I can't. This is too romantic. This is a crime against dignity. The scent attacks. Then came the worst part. The scenting. Alaric would be walking, and suddenly, warm, overwhelming pheromones would wrap around him. Rich, deep, possessive. You looked cold. Later, you blinked too slowly. And once, without warning. You exist. That is not a reason. It is enough for me. This man is insane. The king and his people. And yet, despite everything, Alaric noticed something else. Valerius was different with his people. A child ran into the royal gardens once, chased by guards. Before they could react, Valerius stepped forward, kneeled, and gently handed the child back his fallen toy. Be careful next time. His voice soft, patient, human. The guards froze. The child beamed. And Alaric watched. This is the same man? The same king who commanded armies with blood-stained hands. Was adored like a god by his people. Not out of fear, but love. Palace manipulation. Very subtle, not really. His Majesty hasn't smiled in years. A maid whispered while adjusting Alaric's sleeve. You're the first, another added. He personally checks your meals, and your rooms, and your clothes, and your schedule. That sounds like surveillance. That sounds like love. I'm surrounded by lunatics. The problem. Alaric tried to ignore it. All of it. The way the king looked at him. Soft. Adoring. Hungry. The way he never forced him. Never raised his voice. Never crossed a line he couldn't step back from. The way he always seemed to be there. Watching. Protecting. Quietly. The first crack. It happened without warning. Alaric was walking through the palace gardens one evening. The air was cool. The sky dim. Valerius walked beside him. Unusually quiet. No antics. No chaos. Just presence. And for a brief moment, Alaric felt it. Warmth. Safety. His steps slowed. His thoughts stilled. Why? Why does this feel safe? He stiffened immediately. No. Absolutely not. He turned away slightly. Composed. Detached. I simply have a soft spot for this lunatic king. But then, he started noticing things. Small things. The way Valerius's gaze softened only for him. The way his voice changed. The way he leaned closer. Always closer. And once, when their hands brushed, Alaric flushed. This is ridiculous. As days turned into weeks, the chaos didn't stop. It escalated. The king didn't calm down. He grew worse. More clingy. More shameless. More obvious. And the palace? Fully supportive. If you don't marry him, we will riot. He deserves happiness. You are his happiness. We already picked wedding flowers. Why are there flowers? Standing in the middle of it all, Alaric Thorne, S-tier alpha, feared Duke, master strategist, finally came to one undeniable conclusion. I need to leave this place. Behind him, Valerius watched, smiling, eyes dark with something deeper than love, something far more dangerous. And the entire palace was already ensuring he never would. Chapter 3. The Official Courtship. By the third week, Duke Alaric Thorne had come to a very important conclusion. He needed to leave. Immediately. Preferably before the king decided to inspect the structural integrity of his bedroom ceiling while he slept. The palace, despite its grandeur, had become a place of daily psychological warfare. Not the kind Alaric was used to, no political traps, no hidden daggers, but something far worse. Affection. Unrelenting, shameless, suffocating affection. And while life in the palace had become comfortable, dangerously so, Alaric was still a duke. He had a territory to govern, responsibilities to uphold, and a reputation that was slowly crumbling every time the king called him beautiful in front of an audience. So, like any rational man, he requested departure papers. The royal court fell into a silence so sudden and so complete that it felt unnatural. Alaric stood in the center, posture straight, expression composed, as if he hadn't just unknowingly declared war. "I believe my formalities here are complete, Your Majesty," he said calmly. "It would be best for me to return to my territory." There was a pause, a long one. And then, the air changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't visible. But every single person in the throne room felt it. That shift, that drop, that pressure. Alaric lifted his gaze slowly and met the king's eyes. Gone was the soft, love-struck warmth. In its place, something darker, something ancient, something territorial. Valerius Volkov did not smile. Not this time. "Leave?" the king repeated softly. The single word carried more weight than an entire army. Alaric swallowed. Internally. Externally, he remained composed. "Yes, Your Majesty, my duties?" "No." The word cut through the air like a blade. Simple. Final. The court collectively forgot how to breathe. Valerius rose from his throne, each step toward Alaric slow, deliberate, controlled. But the closer he came, the heavier the atmosphere became. "I allowed you to ignore me," he said quietly. Another step. "I allowed you to pretend you did not understand." Another. "I allowed you to think this was temporary." He stopped in front of Alaric. Too close. Far too close. "But I will not allow you to leave." Alaric's jaw tightened. "And why is that, Your Majesty?" For a brief moment, silence. Then, Valerius exhaled softly. And just like that, something shifted again. Not softer. No. Worse. More certain. "I am in love with you." The words fell into the room like a declaration of war. Gasps echoed. A noble fainted. Someone in the back whispered, "Finally." Alaric stared at him. Blinking once? Twice. "You have said that before." Valerius tilted his head slightly. "That was not official." "I beg your pardon?" "That," Valerius said calmly, "was informal." A pause. "I will court you properly now." The entire court erupted into whispers. Alaric closed his eyes briefly. Of course. Of course this was happening. "I refuse." Silence. Sharp. Dangerous. Valerius did not react immediately. He simply looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time, there was no playfulness. No teasing. No chaos. Only devotion. Raw. Unfiltered. Unshakable. "I will not force you," Valerius said quietly. "But I will not stop either." Alaric's breath hitched, just slightly. "I will court you," the king continued, voice steady, "until you choose me." A pause. Then, softer. "This time, you won't be able to ignore me." And that was the moment Alaric realized something deeply, deeply dangerous. This was no longer a joke. He exhaled slowly, pressed his fingers against his temple, and sighed. "You are aware," he said dryly, "that this is a terrible idea." Valerius smiled. Slow. Certain. "No?" Alaric stared at him for a long moment. Then, against all logic, against all instinct, against every warning screaming in his mind, "Fine," the court gasped. A servant dropped a tray. Someone whispered, "It's happening." Alaric opened his eyes and looked at the king with a tired, resigned expression. "You may court me." And just like that, he handed the tiger permission to hunt him. The reaction was immediate. The palace exploded into activity. Servants ran through halls. Nobles began planning events. The royal advisor sat down abruptly and muttered something about losing control of the narrative. And the king? The king looked like he had just been handed the world. "I will do it properly," Valerius said almost to himself. Then, louder. "For you." Alaric instantly regretted everything. The official courtship began the next day. It was excessive. Lavish gifts arrived every morning. Jewelry, silks, rare books, weapons crafted by master smiths. One time, an entire garden. Did you just gift me land? You like quiet places. That is not a normal gift. It is for you. Public attention followed. Everywhere Alaric went, eyes watched, not with suspicion, but with expectation. If the king loves him, a merchant smiled warmly. Then we love him too. Children waved at him. Nobles bowed deeper. Servants treated him like royalty already. Alaric, who had spent years building respect through fear and competence, was now being adored simply because he existed near the king. This is absurd. And yet, Valerius said beside him, you have not left. I am reconsidering. You won't. Confidence is not always attractive. It is when it's correct. Alaric scoffed, then paused. You are insufferable. And you are staying. Banter became routine. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And somewhere along the way, something changed. Alaric stopped resisting as much. Stopped counting the days until departure. Stopped flinching at the king's proximity. Instead, he started responding, teasing him back, ordering him around, watching with quiet disbelief as the most powerful man in the empire obeyed. Stop following me. No? Go attend your council. Will you come with me? No. Then I will stay here. You are the king, and you are here. Alaric stared at him, then turned away, hiding the faint color rising to his cheeks. It was gradual, subtle, dangerous. The distance between them closed. And one day, without warning, Alaric realized something that made his chest feel strangely tight. The king listened to him, not out of duty, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. The most powerful man in the empire moved at his words, waited for his reactions, watched him like he was something precious. Alaric exhaled slowly. This is a problem. Because somewhere between the chaos, the absurdity, the relentless devotion, he had lowered his guard. And he wasn't entirely sure when that had happened. But one thing was certain. He was no longer just surviving the king's attention. He was starting to live in it. And perhaps that was far more dangerous than anything else. Chapter 4. Blood, Bond, and Betrayal. The banquet was excessive. That was Alaric's first thought as he stood at the center of the grand hall, watching nobles swirl in silks and gold beneath towering chandeliers. Music drifted through the air, light and elegant, while servants moved like shadows carrying trays of delicacies. It was too much. Too grand. Too deliberate. This is unnecessary, Alaric muttered under his breath, adjusting his sleeve. Beside him, Valerius only smiled. For you, the king said simply. Alaric exhaled slowly. He had learned by now that arguing with Valerius was like arguing with a wall that smiled back and did whatever it wanted anyway. Still, something felt off. The attention was heavier than usual, the atmosphere tighter, as if the entire court was holding its breath waiting for something. Alaric narrowed his eyes slightly. What is this really for? Valerius did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned his gaze toward him, soft, intent, almost unbearably focused. You will know soon, he said. That did not comfort him. The night progressed with laughter, music, and far too many watchful eyes. Everywhere Alaric went, people bowed deeper, smiled wider, whispered softer. It was as if the entire kingdom had already decided something on his behalf. And at the center of it all was Valerius, watching him. Always watching him. It happened when the noise became too much. Alaric stepped away from the crowd, moving toward one of the quieter balconies that overlooked the palace gardens. The cool night air brushed against his skin, easing the tension in his chest. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then, footsteps behind him. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. You are avoiding your own banquet, Alaric said dryly. It is not mine, Valerius replied. Alaric glanced at him. No? No. There was something in his tone that made Alaric pause. Something serious. Something different. Valerius stepped closer. Not the usual playful proximity. Not teasing. Not chaotic. Careful. I meant what I said, he began quietly, about courting you. Alaric stiffened slightly. Your Majesty, I do not want you to leave. The words were simple, but the weight behind them. Was not. Alaric looked away, his composure slipping just enough to reveal the faint flush creeping up his neck. There are many people watching, he muttered. This is not the place. I do not care. I do. Valerius took another step forward. I have waited. Stop. Alaric turned to him fully now, expression strained. This is not appropriate, he said, voice lower, tighter. You are the king. There are expectations. There is you. The interruption was immediate, firm, unyielding. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Alaric sighed, running a hand through his hair. You are impossible. And yet, Valerius said softly, you are still here. Alaric opened his mouth. To argue. To deflect. To say something. Anything. He never got the chance. A flash of steel cut through the air. Fast. Silent. Deadly. Valerius's eyes sharpened instantly. But he was a fraction too late. The blade was already aimed for his throat. And Alaric moved first. There was no thought, no hesitation, no calculation, only instinct. He stepped forward and took the blade. A sharp, sickening sound filled the air as steel met flesh. For a split second, everything went still. Then, blood. Valerius caught him before he hit the ground. Alaric. The name came out low, dangerous, unsteady. Alaric's breath hitched, his body going rigid as pain tore through him. His hand instinctively rose to his neck, to the scent gland. Warmth? Too much warmth. Ah, he exhaled weakly. The assassins didn't get a second chance. The moment Alaric collapsed, the king changed. The palace trembled under the sudden overwhelming surge of his aura. Cold, violent, absolute. Kill them. It wasn't a command. It was a sentence. The guards moved instantly. Screams echoed. Steel clashed. Blood spilled. Valerius didn't look back. Didn't care. His entire world had narrowed down to the man bleeding in his arms. Stay awake, he ordered, voice low, urgent. Alaric let out a weak breath, vision blurring. You look terrible, he murmured. Valerius tightened his hold. Do not speak. Alaric gave the faintest hint of a smile. Then, everything went dark. He was rushed inside. Physicians were called. Orders were given. Chaos erupted. And still, it wasn't enough. The wound is too deep. We cannot stabilize the gland. If we delay further, Valerius stood still, listening, silent. He will die. Something inside him snapped. Time slowed. The room emptied. The noise faded. There was only one choice. He turned toward the bed, toward Alaric, pale, unconscious, fading. You leave me no choice, he whispered. The marking was not gentle. It was desperate, possessive, final. Power surged through the bond the moment it was formed. Raw, overwhelming, unstoppable. Valerius pressed his mark into Alaric's scent gland, sealing it permanently. Transferring power. Binding him. Saving him. You are mine, he murmured against his skin, even if you hate me for it. The room filled with the heavy, suffocating scent of an enigma, claiming what he refused to lose. And slowly, Alaric's body stabilized. His breathing evened. His life returned. But the cost would come later. When Alaric woke, the first thing he felt was wrongness. The second was the bond. Heavy, unbreakable. Burning beneath his skin, his eyes snapped open. What did you do? Valerius stood near the window, silent, watching. Answer me. Nothing. Alaric's hands clenched. His voice trembled, not with weakness but with anger. You marked me. Still, silence. Something broke. Without my consent? Alaric's voice rose. You bound me, like I am something you can claim whenever you wish. Valerius didn't move. Didn't speak. That hurt more. Say something. Nothing. Alaric let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Of course. And just like that, he turned away. The silence between them grew. Cold, sharp, unforgiving. Days passed. Alaric refused to look at him, refused to speak, refused to acknowledge the bond that tied them together. And Valerius let him. He stopped approaching, stopped teasing, stopped smiling. He only watched, from a distance, quiet, unmoving. He barely ate, barely slept, because he knew no explanation would matter. Not while Alaric looked at him like that. It happened by accident. Alaric wasn't meant to hear it. His Majesty had no choice. He paused, hidden behind the corridor wall. The wound was fatal. The mark saved his life. If he hadn't done it, silence. Alaric's breath caught. He would have died. The words hit harder than any blade. Everything slowed. The anger, the betrayal, the pain, all of it, cracked. I see. The realization settled deep, heavy, unavoidable, and suddenly, he felt it. Not just the bond, but the truth behind it. When Alaric entered the room that night, Valerius didn't turn. Why didn't you tell me? Silence. Why didn't you say anything? Valerius's voice was quiet when he finally spoke. You were angry. Alaric clenched his fists. That doesn't mean you stay silent. It does, Valerius said, when I know you will not listen. The honesty in his tone was worse than anything else. Alaric stepped closer. You should have trusted me. Valerius let out a quiet breath. I trusted that you would live. Silence. Then, Alaric sighed. Deep, tired. Idiot king. Valerius's head snapped up. Alaric looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time since waking, his gaze softened. You saved me, he said quietly. Valerius didn't respond. Didn't dare. And Alaric hesitated, then exhaled. Overreacted. A pause. I was angry, he admitted, but that doesn't mean I was right. Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Valerius stepped closer. Even if you hated me, he said softly, I would still choose to save you. Alaric huffed lightly. I know. And just like that, the distance between them closed. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Because this time, Alaric didn't step away. Chapter 5. Truth, Love, and Obsession. The announcement came sooner than anyone expected. And yet, no one was surprised. The moment the misunderstandings between them settled, the palace moved with terrifying efficiency. Dates were chosen. Invitations sent. Preparations began overnight. Alaric stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection in royal attire that was far too extravagant for his liking. This is excessive. Behind him, Valerius adjusted the collar of his robes with quiet focus. It is necessary. For whom? For me. Alaric sighed. Of course. The royal wedding. The wedding was nothing short of grand. The entire empire celebrated. Streets filled with flowers, banners raised high, people cheering as if a war had been won. Nobles from distant lands gathered, each eager to witness the moment their terrifying king, feared across continents, stood at the altar with a single man. The same man he looked at as if the world began and ended with him. As Alaric walked forward, the weight of countless gazes pressed against him. Yet, he only felt one. Valerius stood waiting. Still, unmoving. Eyes fixed only on him. Not a king, not a ruler. Just a man. Who had waited. When Alaric finally reached him, he muttered under his breath. You look ridiculous. Valerius smiled faintly. And yet you came. The vows were spoken. The bond reaffirmed. And when Valerius pulled him closer, pressing a soft, deliberate kiss against his forehead, the empire roared in celebration. Alaric Thorn became the queen of the empire. Married life. Peace, Alaric quickly realized, was a myth. You cannot sit on me during council meetings? I can. You are the king. And you are comfortable. I am not. You are. Life became a series of endless banters, stolen moments, and quiet chaos. Valerius remained possessive, territorial, unapologetically attached. If Alaric moved, Valerius noticed. If Alaric sighed, Valerius reacted. If Alaric disappeared for more than 5 minutes, the entire palace was mobilized. You are overreacting. You were gone. I was in the next room. You did not inform me. I refuse to believe I married a tyrant. You did. And yet, despite everything, Alaric stayed. Because somewhere between the madness and devotion, he had stopped wanting to leave. The night that changed everything. Their first night as mates was not grand. Not planned, not perfect. It was quiet, heavy with unspoken emotions. Valerius hesitated, for once. If you are uncomfortable, Alaric rolled his eyes, pulling him closer by the collar. You have already bound me for life, he muttered. Stop acting like a stranger. There was no more hesitation after that. The night was filled with warmth, tension, and something deeper than either of them voiced aloud. Not rushed, not forced, just inevitable. 4 months later, the kingdom erupted. Say that again. Alaric stared at the royal physician, expression unreadable. You are with child, your majesty. Silence. Then, somewhere outside, a scream. He's pregnant. Chaos followed. Celebrations began instantly. Festivals were announced. The palace turned into a battlefield of joy. Alaric, however, was less impressed. I cannot believe this. Valerius, on the other hand, looked like he had ascended to another plane of existence. You are carrying my heir. Yes, I am aware. You are incredible. I am tired. You are beautiful. I will hit you. You won't. The months that followed were eventful. Valerius became unbearable. You should not walk. I am walking. You should rest. I have been resting. You look tired. I am tired because of you. He hovered constantly, watched constantly, protected constantly. Alaric endured it, with increasing irritation and decreasing resistance. Because even in his worst moments, Valerius never left his side. The birth of the heir, the entire palace waited, held its breath, prayed, and when the cry of a newborn finally echoed through the halls, the empire celebrated like never before. A son, the physician announced. Valerius stood frozen for a moment, before stepping forward. Careful, almost hesitant. He looked down at the child, then at Alaric. He has your eyes. Alaric, exhausted but conscious, let out a weak scoff. Obviously. What will we name him? A pause. Then, Kale Throne Volkov. Valerius repeated it softly. Kale Throne Volkov. And just like that, their world shifted. The night of truth. The palace slept. Quiet. Still. Alaric rested in Valerius's arms, half curled against him, surrounded by the steady, possessive warmth of his pheromones. Their son slept nearby in his cradle. Peace. At last. Valerius watched them. Silent. Unmoving. Then, slowly, his gaze darkened. Memories surfaced. Old. Ancient. A time long before this life. The truth. 200 years. That was how long he had waited. He may look young, but he is not. Very few of his trusted subject and palace knew this. He had watched generations rise and fall. Watched the Thorn bloodline grow. Carefully. Patiently. All because of a single pact. A desperate man. A poor ancestor. A bargain made in exchange for power. Wealth. Status. Legacy. And in return, a promise. An alpha would be born in the 4th generation of the throne family with divine powers. One who would belong to him. One who would stand beside him. His queen. And together both their divine powers will maid and divine heir. Valerius had agreed. And he had waited. When Alaric was born, he knew. But then, the boy was taken away. Hidden. His father had tried to break the pact Alaric's great-grandfather made with the divine Enigma. That mistake had not been forgiven. Valerius's fingers tightened slightly around the sleeping alpha. He had orchestrated everything after that. Every step, every path, every choice. Until Alaric had no option left but to come to him. The ambush had not been planned. But it had not been unwelcome either. And those who had dared harm what was his had not lived long enough to regret it. The present. Valerius lowered his head slightly, pressing a soft kiss against Alaric's forehead. I guided your fate. His voice was barely above a whisper. Step by step, his hold tightened. Subtle, possessive, unbreakable. Until you walked into my arms. Alaric shifted slightly in his sleep, leaning closer without awareness. And something inside Valerius snapped further. Not calmer, not satisfied, worse, deeper, more consuming. His pheromones thickened, wrapping around both Alaric and their child like an invisible cage. Now, his voice softened. Dangerously so. No one will take you away from me again. He closed his eyes briefly, resting his forehead against Alaric's hair. Peaceful, beautiful, perfect, and beneath it all, something dark, something eternal. Because even in happiness, his obsession had only just begun.